Kyra, should we get started? Are you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we're the host today. Stephanie's gonna get interviewed.
I will.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I get to pet you the whole time? Oh, thanks.
You're so good. All right, let's start off. What's your name?
Stephanie Olszewski.
Well, hello, Stephanie. We're really excited. In this episode today, we are going to be interviewing one of our co-hosts. So, Stephanie, can you share a little bit about yourself and what you do for a living?
Sure. I am an occupational therapist. I work full-time as a pediatric occupational therapist with kind of a focus in sensory processing disorder and ASD, autism spectrum disorder. And then I work in the afternoons and on weekends and whenever I have a spare moment with my company that I started with Rachel, Diverge Community Services. So that is focused on neurodivergent adults of any kind.
Okay, very cool. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what some of your motivators were for starting Diverge?
Oh yeah. Being a pediatric occupational therapist, there was lots of families trying to pre-plan what they wanted to do with their sons and daughters when they got older, kind of prepping and whatnot. And they didn't have a lot of resources available for them that they were noticing quickly. And I wanted to provide resources and whatnot, but even as a therapist, I couldn't bill for, like, insurance-wise after they turned a certain age. So I would have teenagers knowing that I could not bill their insurance when they turned a certain age, and it was a little bit heartbreaking knowing that people still needed services. They were making so much progress in therapy. The parents are seeing all this progress, realizing it's going to be helpful but also take time to get them as independent as they wanted to be, and they didn't have the resources or services available once they turned a certain age. So that kind of got me start to thinking, why? How can we change this in any way, shape, or form? And it just was that motivator of
Absolutely.
seeing services cut off at a certain age.
Do you have any sense of like why there's that age cutoff? Is this something that's backed by evidence? Is this something well thought out? And
you know what? I truly believe it's just because of the funding that's available for pediatrics, and legislation and everything that is put towards pediatrics and making sure that kids get the help they need. And you know what? They really do deserve it, but it's not like you stop growing or you stop being a person at a certain age. It's a weird concept that we, in the U.S. at least, because in other countries it's different, but in the U.S. our legislation is not built for neurodivergent people growing up.
you know, something else that has stuck out with me that you've shared in the past about your pediatric position is the sheer number of parents who come to you for treatment for their children and start to identify a lot of neurodivergent tendencies in themselves, and some of them continue on to get, you know, formalized diagnosis and ADHD and autism and other things like that, and are coming to you and saying like, okay, now what do I do for myself?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, it's extremely powerful. And frankly, back when we were growing up, there wasn't, like, our parents didn't have the resources to know about what neurodivergence looks like in themselves. They didn't know the language or what to look out for ADHD or autism or TBIs, like for concussions, had no idea. So when they are going for treatment for their kids, they're kind of seeing these similarities, and when you do the research and as a therapist, with all the evidence coming forward that some of these conditions are genetic or likely genetic, and they're like, oh, you know, and it's kind of that realization like, oh, it had to come somewhere.
Right.
And, you know, I
Right.
didn't really notice this was an issue. Like, I too also don't like when my socks feel that way and whatnot, and they're starting to have this self-realization, and they want to be able to regulate and prepare themselves better to be a parent, and they don't have the resources to do so, which could be heartbreaking and whatnot. So I'm hoping that with legislation and what we're doing at Diverge helps change that, where people are actually getting resources and finding out ways to help themselves.
Mm-hmm. So where do you kind of envision or hope to see Diverge go?
I would like it to be a resource for anyone. Kind of like, I feel like BetterHelp is a no name in most households. I feel like I want to be kind of that recognition of name, not being a BetterHelp service, but that recognition where, hey, like we're having a kid that was just diagnosed with ASD. Here's a resource that I've heard of through like a friend of a friend, and it's kind of just this nationally known resource area for people to look at, like different educational materials, or find a therapist that's actually specialized in neurodivergence, not just someone who has lived experience, which is important, but also has research and science evidence behind like different treatment sources.
Sure. And a licensure behind their name that holds them, you know, to certain stringent requirements too. I think that's important. Very cool. Well, I'm sure we are going to dive way more into Diverge.
Yes.
I appreciate you kind of sharing your side and your motivators. Okay, so some more personal questions. What would you say some of your strengths are?
I would say I think out of the box easily. So creativity is a big one of mine. Kind of, I don't love the idea of multitasking. I know that's not an actual thing that our brain does. But I would say if you had to think of someone that's stereotypically multitasked, it would be me. Having a Zoom call while doing dishes, while making a business plan kind of all within the hour is something I do often. So I'd say that's a strength of mine. And also being able to actually relate with my people that I'm working with, having the lived experiences and understanding, you know, from firsthand experience what they're going through, and not just giving kind of a passing, like, oh yeah, like the typical therapist nod, yes, that's exactly how you're feeling. And actually saying, I understand, I've been there with you. You know?
Yeah. So what are some of your interests? Or do you have anything that you'd even consider a special interest of yours?
I would say the only thing currently, I think it just kind of comes and goes in waves with my special interests, but geology and rocks right now.
Oh, yes.
If Rachel has seen
oh my lord,
the rock collection, it did not help that during the pandemic I was in grad school waiting for my last level 2 placement. Everything was on hold, and I got that FAFSA stuff in to pay for a semester that I couldn't do anything in. Literally was twiddling my thumbs. And what was there? Shiny rocks on TikTok and whatnot. So definitely a bit of a downfall, but it's a special interest I think that has been sprinkled in here or there. I mean, if you ask my mom, I had a rock box underneath my bed growing up. So it kind of comes and goes in waves. That's the only one that's come and gone in waves, I guess, for
lifelong.
Yeah, lifelong. Otherwise, crafting, you know, like I've done wood burning before, trained dogs before, trained horses.
This is a new one, yes,
Yep, that's a new one. Although I did do it at the Therapeutic Horse Ranch for a bit.
That's true.
For desensitization for the horses, like having bubbles and stuff around them for pediatric therapy.
Thank you for explaining that. Like having bubbles, where are we going with this?
Yeah, just making sure the horses don't get spooked with whatever random thing we're going to be throwing in a therapeutic session. Trying to think if there's any other ones. Crafting is always of any sort. Doesn't matter if it's knitting or crocheting or using my Cricut, etching glass. I would say that has always been a thing. Yeah. What I'm crafting, who knows? That changes all the time, but yeah.
One of my favorite, I would say, hyper focuses that I have observed from you was you made, like, I don't know, 200 dog bandanas one day. You're just like, I'm making dog bandanas now. Do you want any? I'm like, are you going to sell them? No, I just made a lot.
Yeah.
But you made, like, a lot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it all was in a weekend, and guess what? I gave them all away. I went to the local dog park, said, here's dog bandanas, and then never touched that sewing machine again. So, yeah, I would say I am very stereotypical ADHD, moving on to the next thing. The quote-unquote saying, like, jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
Type of thing. Yep.
Resonates with you, huh?
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Okay, so those are some things you're good at and some things that you really enjoy. What are some spoon drainers for you? And for those unfamiliar, we're calling things that drain your energy. Mm-hmm. And we'll get into spoon theory in another context, but...
Yeah, but energy drainers.
Yeah.
Dishes. Definitely not my strong suit. I would say there has to be blasting music. Yes. I did not have a long day at work type of thing for it to even remotely occur. And then the laundry, godforsaken laundry. Ugh. I think Rachel can attest to this. She's probably come over more times seeing laundry just on my kitchen table, cleaned, went through the washer and dryer, but the fact of actually folding it and putting away, too much for me. I'm like, might as well just grab the clean clothes from the clean basket at this point.
This is true, and there was also this period of time where you had a lot of pre-folded piles on your table too, so it was like the next step was done, so that was excellent, but yeah, actually bringing it to a whole nother room, just too much for me. I would honestly rather do taxes than... Oh, what?
Yeah,
really?
Absolutely.
Gosh, everyone's spoons are different.
Yeah, I it's not my thing.
Awesome. Okay, again, getting a little personal. Can you share with us why you identify as neurodivergent and share as much or as little as you feel comfortable doing?
Well, growing up, I kind of knew I was a little bit quote-unquote different than others. I don't think I really recognized I was neurodivergent until one of my friends mentioned me going to a different classroom for reading class. They're like, why do you go at this hour like 2 to 3 times a week? And I didn't really stand. I just, a good little girl was just being told I had to go to a different room and went to a different room and read a couple paragraphs and left at a certain time.
Good little girl was.
I was just being told what to do. So it didn't click with me. Obviously, it clicked with others because I would not be in that classroom a couple times a week if there was not other people seeing stuff. And that came from, parents and educators saying, like, hey, she doesn't know her ABCs too well, but she's great at math and stuff, so we don't need her all the time. We just need her for little snippets to work on this reading thing that clearly is not clicking for her. So, pretty young, I knew I was different and had some type of brain differences, but... Yeah, I don't think I actually recognized it in myself until I was like 3rd grade, when it was a peer saying, "Oh, why is that? Why are you doing that?" Yeah.
The great irony is you are a book fanatic now. Like, reading is a huge part of your identity and your life. So
yeah, I don't mind it. I would say I still have to have the audiobook while I'm reading. I think it's more of the creativity and storytelling, because also. For me, we have talked about this before, but Rachel loves factual books.
Oh, I can't get enough.
And I am not that person. I need something like, tell me the story that's happening. I want to be in a fantasy world, kind of disassociated from reality, so I can almost picture whatever's happening in the book in my brain like a movie. Yeah. So it's kind of just that novelty. Again, the ADHD, it's got to be novel, and it's way more entertaining if it's a brand new world I'm picturing in my head.
Sure. So are there specific conditions or differences that you identify with
Mm-hmm.
under that neurodivergent umbrella?
Yeah, so the dyslexia and ADHD are kind of the big learning ones, but also anxiety disorder
Okay.
is a big one. I would say I know the dyslexia on a daily basis is kind of a big one that impacts me that others have noticed. I don't care if my letters and everything are misspelled. If you can read my email, it's fine to me. You know, just because I misspelled proprioception or vestibular, but you knew what I meant, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
But the anxiety one, I think, is most impactful on a day-to-day basis. Okay. Sorry about the break there. We don't know what we're doing, honestly. And the camera died, of course, so it's what we get. But
Going to start the timer again. I'm so sorry.
Oh, you're good.
We have to use all of our strategies. We gotta have a timer so that we don't end up talking for 14 hours.
Because it will happen. So yeah, we have a little visual timer down here. So we make sure that we're not going on and on and on. Because I will. Don't let me. I will. So going back to the anxiety, kind of more so.
Good recall about what we were talking about. That's impressive.
It might have been because we talked briefly right before we turned on the camera saying, what did we talk about?
Busted.
But the anxiety portion, I think, is the day-to-day, like, and that's probably more of a social context, like, what are my coworkers going to think if I do this, or am I being a good therapist because I'm using this intervention or not, and kind of overly putting that stress on myself impacts me more on a day-to-day basis than I think the ADHD or dyslexia. Mostly, I believe, because I grew up with knowing my ADHD and dyslexia.
Yeah.
So I've kind of had way more time to process and accept it and learn to, frankly, not give a fuck what others say about it. So as long as I'm getting my job done and I'm not a bad person, I don't think it impacts me that much, and kind of helps being a therapist with executive functioning criterias that I have worked on. So I use the strategies I tell others with myself for those things.
And I think maybe even there's a level of like unconsciousness of how many strategies you do have and just are implicitly applying all the time. But like as someone who's not as far along on my neurodivergent self-discovery journey, it's really obvious to me the strategies that you use. So anyway.
Do you want to give a little context behind that? Like give examples for people?
Yeah. Okay, so a good example is how Stephanie uses note-taking and making lists. And so when we are about to start any sort of activity, she always wants to have a list, which is excellent. I like lists too. But she does them on like graph paper, and she's able to have, or she makes sure that there is something that's going to give her a dopamine boost about that. Like she wants that satisfaction of completing the task, so she can like, usually she'll draw a little box and then she can color in the box with a fun color pen. Like it's just those little things that she has figured out along the way that take it to the next level of just like making a list versus enjoying making a list and routinely doing it. That I think is just kind of ingrained in you, and I'm like, oh my god, that's a really good strategy. But you probably don't even really think about it anymore. She's like, oh yeah, that's how I write lists.
I just have at least 20 different binders that are all graph paper, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephanie, what are some things that you wish more people understood about either ADHD, anxiety, dyslexia, or just neurodiversity, neurodivergence in general?
That so many people are neurodivergent. I don't think people realize that like 15 to 20% of the population is neurodivergent. So when you think of like stereotypical neurodivergence, if you're just talking with your random Joe Schmo that doesn't really know too much about the community, a lot of times they picture Sheldon on like the social media stuff that is kind of stereotypically this person with autism and how they act, but there's not really this understanding of anyone else under that umbrella term. So when you say that you have this condition or you identify as neurodivergent, they automatically put you into this, like, very small categorized area when there's so many more conditions, and you're, even just for autism spectrum disorder, like, that is one person experience of what that looks like versus, like, it's a spectrum. It looks different for all people. So I wish people would actually judge the person as a person individually than just kind of categorize us and put us into a specific box or category that doesn't really explain who we are or what we are.
Absolutely. Okay, I gotta stop using that word as much, but here we are. But it makes me think, Stephanie, you know, there's such a double-edged sword when it comes to TV shows, any sort of pop culture reference to neurodivergence. One, I think it's so important that we bring attention to it, and that you know, the lived experiences are being highlighted, but it's so easy for it to actually do more damage than good, right? And especially when people don't knowingly have that much experience with the community, and they see that one kind of prototype of what is such, as you said, such a diverse community, can really kind of just, like, check a box for someone, like, oh, okay, I understand neurodivergence now, or I understand autism, cool, and not have them be more curious and learn more.
Exactly.
So I think that's kind of a big motivator for what we're doing here too, is just to highlight, like, oh my gosh, there are so many different lived experiences. There are so many narratives that we don't see all the time and every day. So yeah, I love that, Stephanie.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to, for social media wise or any type of media platform, to keep in mind having those diverse voices be the ones creating those characters.
Yes.
Because a lot of times it's someone that's trying to check a box for their, like, oh, we met that diversity box because we included a character with ASD, yet they never consulted anyone in the community on what that character would look like and the impacts on that, what that character is experiencing. Or hiring actors that, you know, have no personal experience with it. So I think it's important to make sure that we have people in the community that are actually advocating for themselves, and also people understanding that you need those outside voices in the social media areas.
Oh, spot on. Spot on. Well, gosh, I feel like we've covered quite a bit, and we try and keep these relatively short and contained so that we're not over inundating people with information and really dumping on them.
Yeah, I will info dump if you let me. So.
Well, yeah, me too. So I'm trying to be mindful of that. But is there anything you'd like to share with us or discuss today in this kind of initial interview with you?
I think kind of just bringing it back to why it's important to talk about neurodivergence and stuff, and just remember that people are people no matter what diagnosis you have, and to keep that in mind whether it's with your employees and stuff, because you're listening to this podcast for a reason.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it's because, like, you have a personal experience, or you're just wanting to know more about a loved one or a coworker or something and just be more educated on it, and just making sure that you keep an open mind and not put people into boxes, and just ask that specific person that you're thinking of for this podcast what they need and everything.
So well said. You are on it today.
Woo woo! It's
I
the
love
caffeine.
it. It's working for you. It's working for you, and I feel like I'm word vomiting. So hopefully your beautiful composure you just had.
I don't think it was very
balanced
good.
this out.
It was all word vomit. So.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Stephanie. I'm sure a lot of people are going to resonate with you know, your shared experience. So thank you so much.
Of course.
Oh,
until next time.
Until next time. And